Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program, and up next are tonight's top stories. Algeria's forging tighter ties with Belgium and Saudi Arabia as economy surges 4.5%. Also coming up, Polisario Front ramps up fight against Morocco, demands UN and the African Union push decolonization. In our news as well, 700 dead, 2 million trapped in Rafah as occupation's humanitarian city plan sparks outrage. Later on, Trump threatens Russia's allies with steep tariffs over Ukraine war. Zelensky hails productive U.S. talks as NATO pledges major arms boost. The details are straight ahead. Welcome back to the program. Tonight, Algeria and Belgium have reaffirmed their commitment to deepening bilateral ties during high-level talks in Algiers between Foreign Ministers Ahmed Attaf and Maxime Prévost. The two nations agreed to modernize legal frameworks, strengthen coordination, and expand cooperation in key sectors, including energy, transport, mining, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals. Discussions also covered Algeria's partnership with the EU, efforts to foster peace and development in the Euro-Mediterranean region, and pressing global issues such as Palestine, the Sahel, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. In the same context, Algerian Energy Minister Mohamed Arghab emphasized that Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost's visit underscores a shared commitment to forging a robust, mutually beneficial partnership. Following their Tuesday meeting, both nations pledged to deepen cooperation in critical sectors like hydrocarbons, renewable energy, hydrogen, and mining. They explored joint ventures in research, exploration, and industrial integration, addressing global energy challenges and the pressing need for energy transition. Prévost praised the strong bilateral ties and affirmed Belgium's eagerness to enhance economic and energy collaboration with Belgian companies keen to invest in Algeria's growing market. Turning to energy markets, Algeria has solidified its position as Spain's top gas supplier in the first half of 2025, providing 32.5% of the country's total imports, according to a leading energy platform. From January to June, Algeria delivered 61.57 terawatt-hours of gas to Spain, with 52.67 terawatt-hours as natural gas and 8.9 terawatt-hours as liquefied natural gas. The United States secured second place with a 15% share, while Russia ranked third at 11.8%. In other Algeria-related news, Algeria's police chief Ali Badawi met with the Saudi delegation led by Public Security Director Lieutenant General Mohammed bin Abdullah al-Bassami to propose a strategic action plan for enhanced police cooperation. The initiative focuses on strengthening coordination to combat transnational organized crime, bolstering crime prevention, and sharing expertise in crowd control, public order, and managing major events.
While we value the progress achieved thus far, we look forward to elevating and enhancing our bilateral cooperation in a way that meets the aspirations of the highest leadership in both our countries. This can be achieved through the implementation of a clear and well-defined action plan to be carried out in the upcoming periods. We propose that this plan include the following: operational coordination against transnational organized crime through information sharing and pattern analysis of criminal networks, exchange of expertise and best practices in public order management, crowd and event management, benefiting from Saudi experience in video surveillance, advanced tech, AI, and cybercrime prevention, including a proposed study visit for our specialized officers.
For his part, Saudi Public Security Director Lieutenant General Mohammed bin Abdullah al-Bassami hailed the fraternal and robust bilateral relations between Algeria and Saudi Arabia, reaffirming his country's commitment to continued constructive collaboration.
إن العلاقة التي تجمع المملكة العربية السعودية.
The relationship between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria is a strong and distinguished brotherly bond rooted in the prominent standing of both nations and the wise leadership of both countries across all fields. This visit comes in response to your earlier visit to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, during which we explored our experience in combating crime and maintaining public order. We firmly believe that the exchange of expertise and continuous coordination between our security agencies will further enhance security, stability, and foster ongoing constructive cooperation.
Algeria's economy is picking up speed. New data show solid growth in early 2025, with agriculture and the food industry leading the way. Lower inflation and stronger domestic demand are also fueling the rebound. Samran Sib has the details.
Algeria continues to record encouraging results thanks to deep structural economic reforms that have significantly transformed the local economy by diversifying its investment and production base. Recent data from Algeria's National Office of Statistics showed notable growth in non-hydrocarbon sectors, particularly agriculture and the food industry. In the first quarter of this year, Algeria's overall economic growth reached 4.5%, up from 4.2% last year. Non-hydrocarbon growth rose to 5.7% compared to 4.3% during the same period last year. Agriculture doubled its growth to 6.1%, and the food industry rose from 1.5% to 5.6%. Service sectors like trade and transport also saw growth nearing 9%. Domestic demand grew to 10.4%, up from 7.4% last year. GDP from January 1st to March 31st reached more than 10,000 billion Algerian dinar, compared to 9,303 billion the previous year. Inflation dropped to 3.3% from 4.3%. These results align with positive assessment from international financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank, recognizing Algeria's political and economic reforms amid challenging global conditions.
To other regional news now, the Polisario Front reaffirmed its commitment to intensifying the struggle against Moroccan occupation in Western Sahara, vowing to complete sovereignty over all Sahrawi territories. In the closing statement of its 7th regular session, the General Secretariat reiterated its support for a just and lasting peace, while stressing the Sahrawi people's unwavering right to self-determination, independence, and resistance by all legitimate means to reclaim their rights and sovereignty. Similarly, the Polisario Front spoke out against what it calls international complicity in Morocco's control of Western Sahara. In a strong statement, the group condemned certain governments for backing what it describes as an expansionist agenda, calling on France, Spain, and the United States to shape their positions and respect Sahrawi rights.
The General Secretariat condemned government stances that support Morocco's expansionist agenda, calling them contrary to international law. It urged all states and entities to respect Western Sahara's international status and avoid actions that exploit Sahrawi resources or fund the war. The Secretariat called on France to end its support for Morocco's destabilizing policies and urged Spain to uphold its legal and historical responsibilities as the administering power. It also called on the US to return to neutrality to support decolonization and regional stability.
The Polisario Front is also pressing the United Nations and the African Union to act. In its latest statement, it called on both bodies to help end Moroccan control of Western Sahara and to defend the sovereignty of the Sahrawi territory.
The General Secretariat renewed its call on the African Union to uphold its founding principles, including respect for inherited colonial borders and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states. It also emphasized the UN's responsibility in completing the decolonization of Western Sahara, the last colony in Africa, and reaffirmed the Sahrawi side's commitment to cooperating with UN and AU efforts for a just and lasting resolution to the conflict.
In a different matter, Algeria praised Spain's call to halt EU-Israel coordination during a Monday meeting between Algerian Council of the Nation's Speaker Azouz Nasri and Spanish Ambassador Fernando Moran. Nasri reaffirmed Algeria's foreign policy stance, emphasizing support for sovereignty, decolonization in Africa, and the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination under international law. And in the Gaza file tonight, occupation troops shot and bombed starving Palestinians waiting for food and water aid in Gaza on Monday, killing at least 6 people and wounding several others. 4 died when a water truck was hit in Nusayrat, while 2 were killed near Rafah Aid Center, marking the latest attacks in what Gaza officials call a systematic war of thirst that has claimed over 700 lives at water distribution points.
Israeli officials say they are moving closer toward a ceasefire deal that would pause the 21-month war in the Gaza Strip against Hamas militants. The officials say that 80 to 90% of the work is now done. They're hopeful a deal can be reached in the coming days. This, of course, does not guarantee success. We have seen repeated ceasefire efforts collapse, but conditions do appear to be ripe for a deal.
In a similar tragic event, at least 45 Palestinians were killed and dozens wounded in a wave of Zionist airstrikes on Gaza City and surrounding areas on Monday. The attacks targeted homes sheltering displaced families in Tel al-Hawa and al-Zarqa, while strikes on Jabalia, Tufah and al-Shuja'iyya and other neighborhoods left 21 martyrs, including women, children, and a journalist. In Khan Yunis, 15 more were killed, among them a nurse, his wife, 3 children, after tents were hit in al-Mawasi. Central Gaza also saw 6 martyrs in bombings on al-Burij, al-Nusayrat and al-Zuwayda. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry reported 120 deaths and 557 injuries in the past 24 hours as occupation attacks continue. In a Monday statement, the officials said the total death toll since the war began has now reached 58,386 killed and over 139,077 wounded. Warnings of occupation's humanitarian city plan arise, calling it forced displacement. The UN says the scheme would trap 2 million Gazans, Rafah's entire population, in a sealed-off zone surrounded by the rubble. Zafar Jenny reports.
Under the pretext of humanitarian aid, the Zionist occupation is constructing a massive detention camp designed to hold hundreds of thousands of Palestinians between Khan Yunis and Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, part of a US-backed plan for forced displacement. In the midst of a brutal campaign of extermination, the Israeli entity is promoting the construction of a so-called humanitarian city which closely resembles a detention center built on the ruins of destroyed homes in southern Gaza. This camp is expected to host around 600,000 Palestinians in an initial phase as the occupation gathers them in preparation for their eventual forced expulsion.
Israeli leaders have begun to talk about their post-war vision for Gaza. Israel's defense minister has told local correspondents that he wants to create what he calls a humanitarian city along Gaza's southern border with Egypt. The idea is to move the entire population there, but he has made it clear that he wants this to be a step toward encouraging Palestinians to leave Gaza altogether.
Although the full details of this Zionist plan remain undisclosed, it has already sparked widespread humanitarian warnings, as it would imprison more than 500,000 Palestinians in what amounts to a large-scale prison, extinguishing their hopes of ever returning to their homeland.
Israel's plan to establish what is called a humanitarian city on the ruins of Rafah in southern Gaza has nothing to do with humanity. Cramming 600,000 Palestinians into that space in the first phase, and eventually all 2.1 million residents of Gaza into a tightly controlled area under strict Israeli surveillance would turn Gaza, already known as the world's largest open-air prison, into the most overcrowded and heavily monitored one on earth.
The proposed project has faced opposition not only from within the Israeli entity, but also from several of its Western allies, who view it as a cover for seizing more Palestinian land and preventing displaced people from returning to their homes.
I'm shocked by the Israeli plan. Palestinian land should not be reduced, and people must not be prevented from returning to their towns.
For Palestinians, the occupation's promotion of this so-called humanitarian city in southern Gaza is merely a repetition of failed Zionist schemes, from the floating port and the General's Plan to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, all of which have been exploited by the occupation to further kill those already starving and thirsty.
In another development, occupation forces admitted 6 soldiers were killed on Monday in Gaza clashes with Palestinian resistance fighters. 3 died when an anti-tank missile struck their Merkava tank, while 3 others were killed and 1 critically wounded in an attack on an engineering unit in Jabalia. The deaths occurred amid simultaneous fighting in Gaza cities الشجاعية and التفاح neighborhoods in Khan Yunis. As regards the truce in Gaza Strip, U.S. President Donald Trump voiced hope for a ceasefire deal within the coming week, confirming that negotiations are ongoing. His Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, also expressed optimism about the talks taking place in Qatar to broker an agreement. In another topical development, U.S. President Donald Trump announced Sunday he will send Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine, citing Kyiv's urgent need to defend against Russian strikes. Trump criticized Russian President Putin's double talk, speaks nicely, then bombs at night, and said the European Union will cover the cost. He did not disclose how many missiles will be delivered.
Well, I'm going to have a meeting with the Secretary General who's coming in tomorrow, but we basically are going to send them various pieces of very sophisticated military, and they're going to pay us 100% for them. And that's the way we want it. And we've been trying to get that again. I don't think Biden ever asked for it. We're in for about $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. That's a lot of money, 100, but they should be in actually for more than us. So as we send equipment, they're going to reimburse us for that equipment. Doesn't that sound good? That's the way it should have been a long time ago.
On a similar note, U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg arrived in Kyiv on Monday, shortly after President Donald Trump announced a new shipment of Patriot missiles to Ukraine. President Zelensky described their meeting as productive, focusing on defense cooperation and tightening sanctions on Russia.
Thank you, General, for participation the first time. We had very good conversation with General just now, and thank you, General, for coming, and thanks. We have often meetings with you and your team. Thanks to your team also for coming to Kyiv. Thank you so much. We are thankful to President Trump for his all messages and very strong decisions about resuming delivers for us, and we are thankful for bipartisan support. And of course, we had very good conversations in Hague, and we had with President, and we had very good phone conversation. We made some decisions very positive for both countries, and just now we spoke about air defense with General.
For his part, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte revealed on Monday that Ukraine will receive a major arms shipment under a new U.S.-NATO agreement, describing the delivery as massive in scale. The announcement came during talks with President Donald Trump at the White House, where both leaders confirmed the multi-billion-dollar package includes ammunition, various weapons systems, and advanced Patriot air defense batteries.
So what we will do is work through the NATO systems to make sure that we know what Ukrainians need. so that we can make packages. Of course, in a way, we discussed it this morning with Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, in a way that, of course, the US will put on its stockpiles necessary to defend this country. That's absolutely clear. But it will mean that Ukraine can get its hands on really massive numbers of military equipment, both for air defense, but also missiles, ammunition, etc., etc.
US President Donald Trump warned Monday he would impose very harsh tariffs on Russia and its trading partners unless Moscow reaches a political settlement in Ukraine within 50 days. The ultimatum delivered at the White House escalates economic pressure over the ongoing conflict.
One of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
And speaking of economic pressure, a new front is opening in the global trade battle. US President Donald Trump is drawing a hard line on trade with America's allies, this time targeting Europe. But Brussels isn't backing down. As deadlines loom, the risk of transatlantic trade war is back on the table. Salman Asib reports again.
First row.
Donald Trump is shaking up global trade, and the EU is firing back. The US president says the era of free riding on America's economy is over, pointing fingers at countries he claims have drained trillions over decades. In a true social post Monday, he rolled out a tougher, reciprocity-based agenda, making clear that both allies and adversaries must open their markets to American goods.
Well, I'm going to have a meeting with the Secretary General who's coming in tomorrow, but we basically are going to send them various pieces of very sophisticated military, and they're going to pay us 100% for them, and that's the way we want it. And we've been trying to get that again. I don't think Biden ever asked for it. We're in for about $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion. That's a lot of money, 100, but they should be in actually for more than us. So as we send equipment, they're going to reimburse us for that equipment. Doesn't that sound good? That's the way it should have been a long time ago.
Perfect. Thank you.
Meanwhile, in Brussels, European Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic unveiled a €72 billion tariff list as a potential response. After an EU trade ministers' meeting, he stressed his preference for negotiation, but warned that 30% duties could be imposed if talks stall.
30% or anything about 30%. So eventually any additional counteraction from the United States, it has more or less the same effect. So it's practically it prohibits the trade. So if you're talking about 30% or 30% plus, there will be a huge impact on trade. It will be almost impossible to continue the trading as we are used in a transatlantic relationship. And if you look at the impact this would have, so I have to say the transatlantic supply chains would be heavily affected on both sides of Atlantic.
With an August 1st deadline closing in, a trade war could rattle everything from cars to crops. This standoff marks a pivotal moment in US-EU relations. Trump's message is loud: no more unfair deals. But the EU's stance signals a showdown could be brewing. Analysts caution that a tit-for-tat escalation risks serious supply chain disruptions and global fallout.
More news stories making headlines around the world in the News in Brief with Sofian Kenturi.
Sudan's Doctors Union reported Monday that 46 civilians were killed in an RSF attack on the village of Wet Hamid in North Kordofan. In a statement, the union described the incident as brutal massacre. Iran has not ruled out the possibility of resuming nuclear talks with the United States. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai stated that for now no specific date, time or location has been set for a potential meeting.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out
Drone attacks blamed on Russia have caused significant damage and triggered large fires in the Sumy and Mykolaiv regions, according to Ukrainian officials.
Work needed in that regard.
On Sunday night at New Jersey's MetLife Stadium, the Blues Chelsea completely overpowered the determined French side Paris Saint-Germain. The English sealed their dominance by scoring 3 goals by the end of the first half.
Chelsea, the FIFA Club World Cup champions.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in and good night.